In the next 60 seconds, your mind will scan for problems in your life at least 14 times. By the end of today, you'll have spent 3 hours mentally rehearsing everything wrong with your life. Here's what's terrifying. Your brain is releasing dopamine every time you complain, the same chemical released during cocaine addiction. You are literally getting high off your own misery. Right now, as I'm speaking these words, I can feel some of you bristling. Your mind is already forming arguments. That's not true. I don't enjoy being miserable. But notice something. Feel your body's reaction right now. Notice how your shoulders actually relax when you start thinking about your problems. Notice the familiar weight of worry settling on your chest. Your body knows exactly how to hold stress because it's addicted to it. I've spent over 4 decades studying human consciousness, working with tens of thousands of people who were standing at the exact same crossroads you might be standing at right now. And what I've discovered will challenge everything you believe about your relationship with suffering. You don't just attract misery into your life. You manufacture it. You cultivate it. You protect it. And somewhere deep in your unconscious mind, you're getting high off it. This isn't about blaming you. This is about waking you up to a pattern that's been running your life without your conscious awareness. Because until you understand why you're psychologically addicted to your suffering, you'll never be free from it. Let me prove this to you right now. Think of your biggest problem. Got it? Now I'm going to prove you don't actually want to solve it. When someone offers you a solution to this problem, what's your first response? Do you get excited about the possibility, or do you immediately explain why it won't work? Your reaction to that question tells you everything you need to know about your relationship with misery. Here's what happened to me when I first discovered this pattern in myself. I was teaching high school, and I realized I was more passionate when I was complaining than when I was actually teaching. I was more alive when I was angry than when I was creating. The metallic taste of resentment in my mouth when I woke up had become as familiar as my morning coffee. One day a colleague said to me, "You could always leave teaching if you hate it so much." And I felt this strange panic. I realized I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay and complain. I wanted to be the righteous victim of a flawed system. My complaining wasn't about solving problems. It was about maintaining an identity. It was a sophisticated psychological defense system that protected me from something even more terrifying than anger: the responsibility of creating a fulfilling life. You see, misery serves a function. It's not random suffering that happens to you. It's your unconscious mind's way of avoiding the terrifying question of what you might become if you actually solved your problems. You don't have to confront your potential. You don't have to risk failing at something that really matters to you. Close your eyes for a moment. Remember the last time you felt genuinely happy. Got it? Now notice how quickly your mind wants to find something wrong with that memory. Notice how uncomfortable it feels to sit with pure joy without immediately thinking about what could go wrong. This is your misery addiction in action. Your brain has been conditioned to believe that happiness is dangerous, that if you're too happy, something bad will happen. So you've trained yourself to find problems as a way of staying safe. But here's the neurological reality. Every time you focus on what's wrong, you're literally rewiring your brain to find more things that are wrong. You're becoming a professional problem finder, and your brain is paying you in dopamine for your expertise. Your nervous system has been hijacked by your own suffering. Every morning, you unconsciously scan your environment for things to worry about. You check your bank account when you're feeling good, knowing it will bring you down. You scroll through social media looking for things to upset you. You rehearse conversations that haven't happened yet, always imagining the worst possible outcomes. This isn't accidental. This is your misery addiction demanding its daily fix. And like any addiction, it's progressive. What used to satisfy your need for drama and problems no longer provides the same emotional intensity, so you unconsciously escalate. You create bigger problems. You attract more complex situations. You manufacture more sophisticated forms of suffering. Let me share with you the most common ways people feed their misery addiction, and I want you to be brutally honest with yourself as I describe these patterns. First, there's the drama addiction. Every conversation is about the latest crisis. Every phone call is about a new emergency. You live in a constant state of emotional intensity, and you've convinced yourself that this intensity equals aliveness. But drama isn't life. Drama is a substitute for life. I worked with a woman named Susan who would check her ex-husband's social media every morning, knowing it would ruin her day. She needed the familiar rush of anger and resentment to feel alive. She was literally starting each day with a dose of emotional poison because she was addicted to the intensity it provided. Susan would spend hours crafting the perfect response to her ex-husband's posts, responses she never sent. She would imagine confrontations that would never happen. She would rehearse arguments from years ago, always thinking of the perfect comeback she should have said. Her entire emotional life revolved around someone who was no longer even in her life. When I asked her why she continued this pattern, she said, "At least I feel something." That's when I knew she was addicted to the emotional intensity that her manufactured drama provided. Notice how your shoulders actually relax when you start complaining. Your body is literally addicted to the stress release that comes from sharing your problems. You're getting a chemical reward for focusing on what's wrong. You've taught your body that the only way to feel normal is to be in a state of low-ground suffering. Then there's the victim addiction. This is perhaps the most insidious form because it disguises itself as righteousness. Victims get to be right. They get to blame others. They get to avoid responsibility. Margaret came to one of my seminars after 23 years of marriage to a man who criticized her daily. But here's what she didn't tell me initially. Every morning, she sat in her car for 10 minutes, mentally rehearsing the fight she'd have with her husband that evening. She was literally practicing her misery. Margaret had become the star of her own tragedy. Her friends gathered around her to hear the latest episode. Her family rallied to support her. Her entire identity was built around being the victim. When I told Margaret this, she walked out of my office. But she came back the next week because somewhere deep down, she knew I was right. And that knowing terrified her more than the abuse ever did. What Margaret discovered was that her victimhood had become her currency. It was how she got attention, how she connected with others, how she explained her lack of success in other areas of her life. If she gave up being a victim, she'd have to face the terrifying possibility that she was responsible for her own happiness. There's also the comparison addiction. This is where you find your identity in being worse off than others. It's a twisted form of competition where the goal is to lose. You can't hear about someone else's problem without immediately sharing a bigger problem of your own. You literally keep a mental scorecard of whose life is more difficult. I remember working with a man named James who would attend support groups not to heal, but to find people who were worse off than him. He'd leave these meetings feeling strangely satisfied, not because he'd received help, but because he'd confirmed that his problems were more complex, more serious, more insurmountable than anyone else's. He was addicted to being the person with the most sophisticated suffering. But perhaps the most dangerous form is what I call the potential addiction. This is where you become addicted to the idea of what you could be, rather than taking the steps to become it. Robert had been writing a novel for 12 years. He talked about it constantly, researched it obsessively, planned every detail, but he never actually wrote more than a few pages. Why? Because as long as the novel remained unwritten, it could be perfect. As long as he was struggling to find time to write, he could maintain the identity of being a misunderstood, artists. During our session, I asked Robert a question that changed everything. What would happen if you actually succeeded? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that will haunt me forever. I'd have no excuse for not being happy. Robert's obstacles weren't preventing his success. They were preventing his happiness. Because as long as he could blame his unhappiness on external circumstances, he didn't have to take responsibility for creating joy in his life. Robert had created an entire mythology around his unfinished novel. He had elaborate explanations for why he couldn't write. His day job was too demanding. His family didn't understand his artistic nature. He needed the perfect writing environment. But the truth was, he was more in love with the story of being a struggling artist than with actually being a successful one. Your misery addiction also serves as a protection mechanism against disappointment. If you expect the worst, you can never be disappointed. If you focus on what's wrong, you don't have to risk hoping for what's right. If you stay in familiar suffering, you don't have to face the unknown territory of genuine happiness. I worked with a woman named Carol who had been single for 8 years. She constantly complained about being alone, but every time she met someone interesting, she would find something wrong with them. Too tall, too short, too successful, not successful enough. She had become so comfortable with the familiar pain of loneliness that she was terrified of the unfamiliar joy of connection. Carol's misery addiction had convinced her that being alone and miserable was safer than being with someone and potentially getting hurt. She had chosen the certainty of suffering over the possibility of joy, and she defended this choice fiercely, always with logical explanations about why each potential partner wasn't right for her. Now, right now, I can feel some of you getting defensive. Your mind is working overtime to explain why your situation is different. But notice something. Feel the familiar comfort of that defensiveness. Notice how your body knows exactly how to hold resentment. Notice how comfortable you are with discomfort. This is your misery addiction talking. And here's the most disturbing part. Your addiction is so sophisticated that it's convinced you that your suffering is noble, that your problems are proof of your depth, that your struggles are evidence of your sensitivity. The psychological function of misery addiction runs deeper than most people realize. It's about maintaining a familiar identity. You've been unhappy for so long that unhappiness has become who you are. The thought of being truly happy feels like death, because it would mean the death of the person you've always been. Linda, a woman who had been depressed for most of her adult life, began experiencing moments of genuine joy during our sessions. But instead of celebrating these moments, she became terrified. I don't know who I am when I'm happy, she told me. It feels fake, like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. She was more afraid of being happy than she was of being depressed, because depression was familiar. Depression was safe. Depression was her identity. Linda's depression had become her full-time job. She knew exactly how to be depressed. She knew what to wear, how to sit, what to say, how to breathe. She had mastered the art of suffering. But happiness? Happiness was foreign territory. It required skills she'd never developed, muscles she'd never strengthened, neural pathways she'd never created. Here's what you need to understand about the neurological reality of misery addiction. Every day you feed this pattern, you're literally rewiring your brain to find more things to be miserable about. You're creating neural superhighways that lead straight to suffering. You're becoming highly skilled at finding fault, at anticipating disaster, at remembering every slight. This is the insidious trap. The more you practice misery, the better you become at it. But here's what I discovered about myself that will shock you. When I imagined my problems being solved, I felt empty. I felt like I would have nothing to talk about, nothing to think about, no reason for people to pay attention to me. I realized that my problems had become my personality, and the thought of being problem-free felt like losing myself. That's when I understood that underneath every misery addiction is a legitimate need. The need for attention, for connection, for identity, for purpose. The problem isn't the need itself. The problem is that you're trying to meet these needs through suffering rather than through joy. You're filling a genuine void with counterfeit emotional currency. Here's a simple but powerful test that will reveal your relationship with misery. For the next 24 hours, notice every time you complain, every time you focus on what's wrong, every time you tell a story about your problems. Don't try to stop these behaviors, just notice them, count them. Become aware of how much of your mental and emotional energy is devoted to misery. Then ask yourself this question: what would I have to give up if this problem were solved? What identity would you lose? What attention would you no longer receive? What responsibility would you have to take? What risk would you have to face? When you start to give up your misery addiction, you'll face what I call happiness withdrawal. Just like any addiction, when you stop feeding it, you'll experience withdrawal symptoms. You'll feel anxious, empty, confused. You'll wonder who you are without your problems. You'll miss the intensity of drama. You'll feel guilty about being happy when others are suffering. This is normal. This is part of the process. These feelings are temporary. They're not a sign that you're making a mistake. They're a sign that you're breaking free from a pattern that has been controlling your life. But here's what I need you to understand. Your misery is not protecting you. It's imprisoning you. It's not keeping you safe. It's keeping you small. It's not making you special. It's making you ordinary. Because choosing misery requires no courage, no growth, no risk, no faith. The people in your life have learned to connect with you through your problems. They've learned to show love by listening to your complaints. They've learned to demonstrate care by joining you in your misery. When you choose to give up your misery addiction, you'll discover who truly loves you and who is just addicted to your drama. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of recovery from misery addiction, recognizing that some of your closest relationships are built on shared suffering. Your family members might unconsciously resist your happiness because it threatens the familiar dynamic. Your friends might feel uncomfortable with your joy because it highlights their own misery addiction. You can get attention by sharing your victories instead of your defeats. You can connect with others by celebrating life instead of commiserating about problems. You can build an identity around your strengths instead of your weaknesses. You can find purpose in creating rather than complaining. Tonight, when someone asks how you are, say, "I'm grateful," instead of listing your problems. Tomorrow, when you catch yourself complaining, stop mid-sentence and say, "I choose differently." Next week, when you're tempted to check your ex's social media or call your most pessimistic friend, choose to do something that brings you joy instead. Right now, in this moment, you have a choice. You can continue to feed your misery addiction, to maintain your comfortable suffering, to stay small and safe and familiar, or you can choose to step into the unknown territory of genuine happiness. This choice isn't a one-time decision. It's a choice you'll have to make every day, every hour, every moment. When someone asks how you're doing, you can choose to share your struggles or your gratitudes. When something goes wrong, you can choose to see it as a catastrophe or as an opportunity. Your misery is not your identity. Your problems are not your personality. Your struggles are not your story. You are so much more than your suffering. You are a being of infinite potential, capable of creating beauty, expressing love, and experiencing joy beyond your wildest imagination. But you can only access this potential when you're willing to let go of the familiar prison of misery and step into the unknown freedom of happiness. The choice is yours. The moment is now. The life you've been dreaming of is waiting for you on the other side of your addiction to suffering. Are you ready to give up your misery? Are you ready to face the terrifying possibility that you might actually be happy? Are you ready to discover who you really are when you're not defined by your problems? Because here's the final truth I need to share with you. The moment you stop enjoying your misery is the moment you realize you always had the power to be happy. Every day you delay is a day you're choosing death over life, limitation over possibility, fear over love. The time for change is now. The person to make it happen is you. And the first step begins with the courage to admit that you've been secretly enjoying your misery, and the wisdom to know that you deserve so much more than the comfortable prison of your own making.